Good morning, class. Welcome back and compliments for the new year. I hope it's going to be a productive year for you, and I'm sure it will be a better year than other years. I'm going to present to you learner development and learning, and as you can see on your screen, those are the codes, the subject that falls under. You are coming from different, some are doing certificates, some are doing diploma in secondary, and so on. So you are all doing the same module. It's just that it's at the different, you are at different levels of qualifications. So this is learner development and learning, and I'm going to give you a presentation that you need to take a lot of things into consideration when you're either doing your assignments or when you are doing your examination. They are all important, and you need really to take good look at what is being presented here. My name is Alna Sam, and those are my contact number. My telephone number is there. My email address is there, and the contact hours are there as well. You contact me from 1800 hours to 1900 hours, 40 minutes. So those are the times that you are free to contact me. You don't contact me during working hours because I'm also busy with other things. But I want you to contact me mostly when you also knock off and you just have your spare time, and you can call me if there's something that you don't understand. My number is there, and if you feel like you need it in writing, you can also send me an email. So development of adolescence, that's what we have to look at. We are going to, students, you should be able to define the following concept. It's very important for you to understand what the following concept is all about. You should be able to define what adolescence is all about. You should be able to define what is maturation is all about. And you should be able to define what multiculturalism and bilingualism is all about. And when it comes to multiculturalism and bilingualism, you should also be able to differentiate between the two. Those four definitions, those four concepts are very important in your examination, and they are also important for your understanding when you are doing your assignment. So in most cases, when students are asked to differentiate between multiculturalism and bilingualism, they can't give a difference. So it's very important for you to be sure that you know the difference between the two. So developmental domains, I also want you students to look at, differentiate between the developmental domain. When a person is growing, the person grows physically, the person grows cognitively, the person grows socially, the person grows emotionally. So those are the domains that we mostly focus on growth. And I want you to know the difference between the two. What do we mean about physical development? The physical development is what we see, growth physically, that we see the body, your weight, your height, everything. That is physical development. Then we look at cognitive development, which deal with your mental capacity. How do you reason? How do you make decisions? How do you decide on certain things? That has to do with cognitive domain, cognitive development. Then we also talk about social domain, which mostly how do we socialize with people? How do we interact with people? How is our relationship with people? And we also have emotional domains that has to do with our feelings. How do we feel about certain things and so on? And this has, all those domains are different from stage to stage, from age to age, because the person who is 20 years old physically cannot be looking like a 5-year-old child. And cognitively, they cannot reason the same. And socially, they don't have the same friends. So you need to understand how each domain can be affected by age, and at what age do you do this, and at what stage do you do this, and what are the factors affect each domain as well. What are those factors maybe affecting my growth physically? What are those factors affect my growth cognitively? What are those factors can contribute to me to think properly? What are those factors can also contribute to me not to be a good thinker? What are those factors can contribute to me to be not a good person to socialize with other people as well? Emotionally, what are those factors that can affect my mental well-being as well? So it's very important for you, as much as you're understanding the difference between those domains, you should also be able to understand the factors that can affect those developmental domains. They can be negative factors, they can be positive factors as well. So, factors impacting normal development in any domain. Students must be able to discuss factors that are likely to affect development and how do they affect development. For example, if I'm saying the kids are living in poverty, which domain will be affected? Physically, yes, they might be affected because the child is not growing because of nutrition and so on. How does it also contribute to cognitive development? Because each factor contributes to another factor, and each factor affects every domain, contributes to another domain as well. These domains are interrelated, because each domain affects the other domain. If one domain is affected, it can easily affect the other domain as well. It's very important for you, when you have the factors that impacting the developmental domain, make sure that how does it affect it, and how does it affect the other domain as well, because they are all interrelated. So I also want you to look at heredity and environment. When we are talking about heredity, is those factors that we are born with, inborn factors. Then we are talking about environment. Those are factors where we grow up in, and they can also contribute to the way we grow, to the way we develop, to the way we also all our holistic development. Students must be able to understand the following: the process of genetic transmission. What is that process? How does it go? What are the influence of genes on development? Some people are coming from genes where that's why you'll find a child who is 5 years old looking like a 10-year-old child, and the other one who is 5 years old looking like a 4-year-old child. Sometimes it can be about the genes. How do genes influence development in different cognitive domains? In different domains, developmental domains, cognitively, physically, emotionally, and so on. How do those domains are affected by heredity or the genes, to say? How does the environment also affect the development? The environment where you are growing up, how does it affect the development? The environment where you are growing up, how does it affect you physically? How does it affect you cognitively? How does it affect you emotionally? And how does it affect you socially? So it's very important for you to understand what exactly is happening in those domains and what are those factors. So I also want you to know that integrate the roles of school in socialization, because the school play a very important, crucial role in socialization. How do children socialize with others? What is the impact of school? What is the role of the school? Why do we send our kids to school? And when the child is coming from school, we always ask, who is your friend? I want to know who is your friend, I want to know who socializes with my child. Why do you want even to know? Because it got impact on the way they socialize with people, and it also influences the way they behave. So it's very important for you to state why it is important to understand the development of gender roles and identity in the family and school. So When we are talking about gender roles, what do girls can do? What are the boys can do? What are their roles in the family? What are their roles at school level? And also discuss the purpose of sex education. Very crucial for us. There's a big debate going on. Some parents will say they want their kids to be taught sex education. Some parents will say it's not age appropriate. They don't want anything, but later on they will hear their daughter is pregnant and so on. So why do we need to have sex education in schools? You have to discuss the purpose. And if the parents are saying my child should not learn about sex education, as a teacher, how will you handle this situation? So very important for you to go through that, for you to understand the purpose of us having sex education at school. So, and when the parents are also arguing with you that they don't want their kids to be taught sex education, what will you tell them? So it's important for us to know what is that I can tell them. We also have to understand abuse. Students must be able to identify signs of the following types of abuse. We have physical abuse, we have emotional abuse, and we have sexual abuse. Kids can be abused physically, kids can be abused emotionally, kids can be abused sexually, or all of them. Some kids can have combination of all the types of abuse mentioned here. So it's up to you as a teacher, a child coming to your class, you being the teacher, how do you identify the signs to say this child is being abused physically? How do you identify that this child in my class is emotionally abused or sexually abused? What are the signs that you will be able to pick up? And what do you do when you pick up those signs? Very important for you to know the types of abuse and what are the signs, what are the symptoms of those abuse. Schools are faced with behavioral problems. Students must be able to critically analyze the causes of behavioral problems. What are the causes of behavioral problems in schools? Some say loud music, some say violence, some say bullying, some say there are so many things that people talk about. Lack of training, teachers don't know how to handle learners at school. All of them have different reasons for behavioral difficulties at school. So, however, what I want you to do, you should critically be able to analyze them. What are the causes? Because it's a major concern in schools. How to handle them? So when you identify the causes, how do we handle those causes? How do we handle those behavioral problems? Lastly, students must be able to discuss ways on how to prevent those challenging problems at school level. First of all, when it comes to behavioral problems at school, you identify the causes. That's point number one. What are the causes? Then you go on to see how do you handle them, because you already having behavioral problems at school. How are you going to handle it? How are you going to manage it at school level? And lastly, you need to understand what are the ways to prevent those challenging problems so that they will not recurring again, so that they will not be happening again. So you need to understand all of them. So for Unit 2, you have to look into self-concept. So students must be able to define what self-image and self-concept is all about. You should be able to define the two, and you should be able to differentiate the two. They should be able to describe the importance of positive self-concept. When we have learners who are having positive self-concept, what are the importance? So it's very important for you to know. Discipline and punishment. As a teacher, we mostly do that at school level. We discipline, sometimes we punish. what are the difference between the two. You need to understand the difference between the two, and so that you can give definition when you are asked. Students must be able to differentiate between punishment and what is discipline. They define also the following disciplinary styles, because when we are disciplining learners, we do it in different styles. Some we do it in authoritarian style, some we do it in democratic style, persuasive style, and so on. So you need to differentiate again when we are saying that teacher used authoritarian style of discipline, what do we mean? You need to know, even you being a teacher, you need to know what style of disciplining you are using in your classroom setup. And also for Unit 3, I want you to look at theories of development. Differentiate between the following theories of human development: psychodynamic theory, behaviorist theory, social theory, cognitive theory, humanistic theory. All those theories are very important in child development. We need to understand how do those theories understand development, how do those theories relate to development, how those theories attend to development of the child. So it's very important for you, being the teacher, you understand. If you are given a definition, or you are given to differentiate between humanistic theory and social theory, you should be able to tell. You should be able also to tell who came up with that theory, who are the fathers of those theories, who are the founders of those theories. Very important for you to take note of that. Another concept that you need to understand in this chapter is learner-centered education. If you go to schools, you will hear more about learner-centered education. People are talking about learner-centered education. In the past, it was more teacher-centered approach. But however, now the focus is learner-centered education. What this concept, very crucial concept in education, you need to know how do you define it. You need to find a definition for it. They must also describe theories of motivation, because motivation is having different theories. When we are motivating learners in our classrooms, we do it in different ways. And define what motivation is all about. What is the definition of motivation? And what are the theories that are dealing with motivation? So you need to know, when I am getting my books to the class, am I teaching the learners and I want to motivate them? How do I motivate them? Which theories am I using when it's come to motivation? So I also want you to discuss features of gifted learners. Who are the gifted learners? And also the support that teacher can give to gifted learners. Because in the past, people didn't really pay attention to gifted learners. They put more concentration on average learners and learners who don't understand at all, or learners with learning difficulties. However, research found out that learners who are gifted, they are also having issues, because in most cases when you are teaching in the class, they don't even, they are not concentrating because the class is boring. They are not concentrating because they know already what you are teaching. The levels that you are delivering the subject is not at their level. How do we handle them? How do we pick up that this child in my class is truly gifted? And as a teacher, how am I going to support them? By giving them activity, by giving them extra work to do on this, or also by making them group leaders and do a lot of presentation? Or how am I going to help the child who really understand everything that I'm already teaching? Then we have Unit 4, which is looking at learning theories. Discuss the roles of attention and how teachers could support learners with learning difficulties. In the previous unit, we said we are talking about gifted learners. These are learners whose IQ is above average. And here we are talking about learners with learning difficulties. These might be learners who are struggling to catch up with the lessons. This might be learners who have difficulties in learning. So what are the roles? How do we give them activity that help them to pay attention, and how do we support them to learn better? So you also need to differentiate between surface learning and deep learning. In most cases, when you ask students to differentiate between the two, they struggle to give you the definition because they just put surface learning is basic, deep learning is going deeper. And what do you mean? Because you need to give the difference. You need to give deep definition between the two by even giving examples. In your study guide, there are examples for each. Please, when you are studying, I don't want you just to memorize. You must study with understanding, which is about deep learning. Study with understanding. Study, and you should be able to apply it in real life situation, not just for examination purpose, not just for assignment purpose. You need to study for your learning. You need to study so that you can apply the skills in your classroom situation. I mentioned common barriers to learning. We talked about a lot of barriers, for example, lack of trained teachers, overcrowded classrooms. We talked about lack of facilities. We talked about lack of parental involvement and so on. So you being a teacher, what are the common barriers? It's not about barriers that you are just seeing in the study guide. There are a lot of barriers that you experience every day. You get in touch every day being the teacher. So you need to mention them, and if the question asks you to mention and define, you should do so. State how the brain processes information is also important for you to understand about how the brain processes information. You need to understand about the short-term memory, long-term memory, and the difference between the two as well. Unit 5 is self-directed learning and thinking skills. What is self-directed learning skills? You need to understand and identify proper study habits. So when you are training the learners in your class, you want them to have proper study habits that they can use so that they learn how to develop problem-solving skills in the learners, because you don't want learners who can't solve problems, but you need to develop them on how to solve problems. It can be personal problems, it can be educational problems, it can be academical, vocational problems, and so on, because you don't want learners who are forever coming to you saying, let's do this, and that, and that, and that, without you giving them skills on how to handle their problems in future without you. So that is the end. And if you are having other concern or problems, you should always be able to contact me. But what we have highlighted here are the main key points for either your examination or for your assignment. Pay attention and study with understanding. You shouldn't just study for examination, you shouldn't study for the assignment, but you must read deeper for understanding, because these are the skills that you need to apply in your classroom setting. I thank you.